You're watching Medfield TV, Community Shows.
Welcome to Simply Legal. I'm your host, Geralyn Warren, longtime Medfield resident and practicing attorney here in Medfield. As my viewers are aware, each month I present a program that I know you find not just interesting but also useful. Today will be no exception. I am very fortunate to have with me Dan Daley from the Metrowest Legal Services. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Dan, before we begin, do you want to just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a housing attorney with Metrowest Legal Services. I started back in 1994, almost straight out of law school. So I've been at legal services for approximately 20 years, and I specialize currently in foreclosure defense work. I'm not sure that the viewers are really aware of what Metrowest is about, so if we could start with maybe a history of Metrowest? Sure. This year we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. So the office opened in 1976. I think your viewers are probably more aware of the Public Defender's Office, where if a person has been arrested for a crime, they're entitled to a court-appointed attorney if they can't afford one. And on the civil side, there's not the same entitlement to a court-appointed lawyer. So Legal Services Office is developed out of a need to help low-income people in civil matters. And so that started in the mid-'70s, and that's when our office opened. Now, do you get state funding for your office? Yeah, we get state and federal funding, and we also get private grants from foundations. But it's important for your viewers to know we're a nonprofit organization. We're not a state agency of any kind. What kind of cases do you usually handle? Well, like I said, we provide free legal services to low-income people in civil matters, and so we don't handle any criminal defense work. And what kind of civil cases, though, do you? Yeah, sure. In our cases, we center around basic needs. So, for example, we do housing law. In those kinds of cases, we might help somebody who's being evicted from public or subsidized housing. Again, I specialize in foreclosure defense work, so if someone is, if their home is being foreclosed, I assist them in those cases. In addition, we help in the housing area, we help folks who may have applied for a housing subsidy and been denied, or they may be experiencing a termination of their housing benefits, so we assist in that regard. A lot of the housing work we do involves clients with mental health problems. So in those cases, typically we're requesting accommodations, reasonable accommodations, to support them through a disability so they can maintain their housing. So as you can see, we a lot of types of cases we work on in the housing realm. In addition, we assist victims of domestic violence, and we do that through family law cases. So we might help a victim with a divorce or through a child custody case or support. We also help victims. Can I ask, do you get referred those cases sometimes through the defender's office, or? Yes. Yeah. Oh, sure. We get most of our referrals through other agencies in the community that know of us and the work that we do, and where clients need our assistance. We might help a victim get an abuse prevention order or some immigration relief as well. We also do special education where we help disabled children with an individualized education plan, help them, support them in the classroom.
That's good to know.
Yep. We do government benefits. We help folks with Social Security, disability, unemployment, emergency shelter help, transitional benefits. So if someone were to apply for benefits and they were denied, we may assist them in trying to help them with those benefits, or if their benefits are being terminated for some reason. And of course we do elder law. We didn't talk about this initially, but to qualify for our services, you have to...
Before we go on to how you qualify, I was wondering, as you list those cases that you will represent someone in those situations, are there cases that you really don't handle or not? Yeah,
there are cases we don't handle. Certainly is the criminal cases. We obviously don't handle. There are some consumer cases that unfortunately we're not able to handle. I know on the elder...
Tort cases, do you handle?
No, we generally don't handle personal injury kind of cases. Cases that are really best suited for the private bar, we don't typically handle those kinds of cases. For elder cases, we do all that basic, the basic needs.
Applications?
Yeah, in addition we do mass health stuff, we do some consumer stuff for elders, debt collection, defense work, as well as bankruptcy. Sometimes we'll help someone do a Chapter 7 bankruptcy to get some debt relief.
So I had interrupted you. You started with the requirements. So do you want to talk about then, who might be able to take advantage of your services?
Right. Unfortunately, we have to limit the folks who can access our services to those individuals with low income. So the income guidelines we use is 125% of the federal poverty guidelines. And so to give you an example, for a family of 4, that would be approximately $30,000 gross household income per year. So as you can see, it's fairly low. In some cases, we have the ability to go a little bit above that, depending on a household's expenses. So sometimes we can go as much as 187.5% of the federal poverty guidelines. Typically, that's a difference of about 15,000 additional.
So I know for myself as an elder law attorney, if I'm doing a mass health application, like you said, there are times that even though I have the limits that I have to abide by, like you said, you can say, well, the household is costing this much money to run, so can the patient paid amount be different than what normally maybe the state would say it has to be? Do you have like that kind of application process, so when they're applying and their income might be a little over $30,000, that they can show that their costs are higher?
Yeah. Yes, we do, and for elders, which we define as anyone 60 or over, there are no income requirements for our services. So for an elder, they qualify for our services even if they exceed the income guidelines we just talked about.
Oh, that's good to know for my viewers.
So, good. But again, we also have that ability to go to that higher level, that 187.5% level, if there's an extraordinary expense. So our executive director can give permission for us to go above our usual guidelines.
So let's say someone came to legal services and needed help in one of the situations where you say you do cover, like a housing situation. Is there the first screening process is looking at what their income is? Is that your first screening process to look at income?
Yes, we have support staff. So if someone were interested in our services, they would call the office, and there's an initial screening that is conducted where, of course, we have to make sure that the person lives in our service area.
Oh, okay.
So our service area covers, we cover essentially 36 towns, including obviously Medfield, and we cover some South and Central Middlesex counties in northern Norfolk County. So we go as high up as Concord, down to Plainville, over to Dedham and west to Marlboro Hudson. So that sliver in Middlesex County and northern Norfolk County is where we...
That's a large area.
It is a large area. We have about 40,000 people qualify for our services on an income basis in that area, which is probably more than people would guess. We assist approximately 2,400 clients each year, which is, we're a small office, we have about 10 attorneys.
So because you're a small office, and I'm sure because of funding, you're probably stretched to the limit, if a person has a situation where they do reach the income level and you can help them, are you always able to follow the problem all the way through to resolution, or, I mean?
Well, unfortunately not. You know, we provide different levels of service. Sometimes we're able to assist somebody with legal advice, which may not take a lot of time, or a brief service, which may take just several hours, maybe a letter or something. And of course, we provide full representation at court as well. Unfortunately, because of our limited resources, we turn away about 60% of the people who call our office and need our help, who would otherwise be eligible and have a meritorious legal claim that we simply can't do the work.
Because of staffing?
Because of limited staffing.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So sometimes I would think that you could direct them maybe in a different direction, and like you said, you give them some advice. Well, we can't necessarily take this on, but you could check out this service is available. Is that one of the things you're able to do? Yeah,
we're able to do that for sure. And when someone comes in and and we assess them for their legal matter, we also assess them for other needs they may have and make appropriate referrals. Unfortunately, we're the only law office that provides free legal services, and so if they have a legal matter and we can't handle it, typically, unfortunately, that person goes without legal representation.
You don't handle veterans affairs either, do you? Usually, do you send them to like the Shine officer in the town, or
sure.
Do you handle veterans?
Well, I'm not...
like aid and attendance, that kind of
program? No. Yeah, we would definitely refer them. But we certainly obviously represent a lot of veterans in the work that we do. But
I meant with specific veterans benefits. Do you help them like guide their way through the veteran benefits? Because I know that a lot of times they have a lot of questions about the paperwork.
Yeah, I think that's probably something we refer to the
Shine.
Yeah, that advocate.
And the veterans officer.
Yeah.
In our town, it's the same person, so that's
okay.
why.
Okay.
Well, you know, I was wondering if maybe you could go through for the viewers a case study. You know, like maybe one of your cases.
Sure. I mean, one of the things obviously our main goal is to help as many people as we can, but we also look for cases that can be more impactful, cases that the legal issue may help more than the person we're representing. So sometimes we come across that. I know I had a case, a housing case, where it was a single mother with 3 kids. She lived locally, and her son was a teen, and he got involved in he was arrested for some gang activity, and he was sent to jail. And this family was receiving a housing subsidy, and of course the mother and his 2 younger siblings had nothing to do with the criminal activity, but their housing was being terminated as a result of the son's criminal activity. And so typically, if you're dealing with a person or a household that has a disability, the law says that if the eviction or the cause of the eviction arises out of somebody's disability, that you can, if that disability can be reasonably accommodated, you can maintain that housing. We see that typically with maybe someone who might have a mental health issue, who may hallucinate, for example, and may cause a disruption at night, which may affect a neighbor's ability to sleep. If that same tenant could receive some medication that could help with those hallucinations, then even though he or she may have violated the lease in the past, that they could stay with that accommodation, that they would receive that treatment and that medication. In this case, the activity that led to the termination of her subsidy was the son. But his two smaller sisters were severely disabled. So we were able to, with a lawsuit against the subsidy provider, which I was co-counseled with another attorney from another legal aid office, we were able to put an argument forward that the disability of the two kids who had nothing to do with the brother use that disability to request an accommodation, where we asked them, of course, to, in a sense, modify their policy to allow them to stay on the program, because they had nothing to do with that, with that brother's
Situation,
conduct.
yeah.
And so that was an example where we could use the law and interpret it in a way that was useful to this family to stay on the Section 8 program.
So now you also mentioned that a lot of your work has to do with foreclosures. Can you give me an example, or the viewers an example, of where you might have a case with regards to foreclosure?
Yeah, I mean,
That's been coming up more and more.
yeah, I think that, and I think you mentioned you may have had someone from the Registry of Deeds here recently, and
Yes.
he probably mentioned that the notices for foreclosures are up this year, and that's because there's been a lot of litigation around foreclosures. People, I think your viewers are aware that there was a foreclosure crisis when the housing bubble exploded back in 2008, 2009. And so it's been very disruptive for a lot of communities. So of course people understand that the banks at the time were given mortgage loans to folks without really assessing their ability to pay back the mortgage. So that's kind of how this crisis came about. So we're seeing a lot of that in the work that we do, and there's been a lot of litigation over what constitutes a valid foreclosure process. A lot of these mortgages, without getting too technical, were securitized by the banks and investors and given to investors, and as a result, the mortgages pass through a lot of hands.
And that's really troubling for some clients, because all of a sudden they don't even know who's holding their mortgage.
Exactly. They don't understand who holds the mortgage or the underlying note or the promise to pay, and so there was a lot of litigation around that. And more recently, the highest court here in Massachusetts has resolved some of those issues, and in resolving some issues, they've created new issues. And so there was a bit of a lull in foreclosures, but now it looks like that's picking up again. And so what we try to do at our office is we try to help people obviously keep their homes, so we prioritize cases for those situations. And I have one case that I wanted to mention, just because the facts are somewhat incredible. So it was this couple, a middle-aged couple, and they had a mortgage loan, and the husband lost his government job after being there for many years. I want to say like 20 plus years. And as a result of that, they fell behind on their mortgage. So a job loss is a typical reason why someone might fall behind. And at the time, the government had put into place a new program to help families who had fallen behind on their mortgage to modify the terms of their mortgage to make the monthly mortgage payments affordable again, so that they could keep their homes. And so this family participated in that program, and they completed the entire loan modification process, all the paperwork. They submitted it timely. The bank had acknowledged that they received that paperwork, and even told the family that they were assessing it and they would give them a decision within 30 days. And during that time, they went forward on the foreclosure without
Did someone not communicate with the other person, or what?
Well, exactly. The bank had told them that they were going to stop the foreclosure process, and then, for whatever reason, they didn't do that, and the house was foreclosed. And the couple obviously contacted the bank upon learning about this, and the bank said, "Don't worry, we'll rescind the foreclosure. We'll undo it." But that didn't happen either. Despite these promises, the bank went forward on an eviction, which is the last step in the process where someone is forced to leave their home. And again, through this process, they kept thinking it was going to work out, so they
Sure.
never got an attorney to help them. And as a result of the eviction, they signed an agreement where they vacated their home and they moved into an apartment. And after all that, they still felt like this.
This will resolve itself.
Yeah, well, that this didn't work out the way that it should have, and they finally came to my office and met with me, and I immediately sued the bank. And although it took a while, we were able to.
The house hadn't been sold, had it?
The house had been sold at the foreclosure, but to the bank,
Okay,
which is
that's what I
not
meant,
uncommon. When a house.
And can I just interrupt? Yep. I just want people to understand that the declaration of homestead, because sometimes people don't understand that does not protect them from a foreclosure, because it's only protecting from unsecured creditors. So, and the banks and the mortgage companies are secured creditors. So I just wanted that to go out there, because sometimes people think the declaration of homestead would protect them in this kind of situation, and it does not. That's right.
That's right. So the bank is first in line. Once, a mortgage is a security interest on the underlying loan.
That's right.
And so if you don't pay the loan, the bank has, in Massachusetts, without any judicial process, can proceed with a public auction of foreclosure sales. So yes, a homestead will not protect in that case. But here again, the family understood that this isn't right. The bank had made promises. The bank was supposed to process their modification and hadn't done so. So they came to me. I filed a lawsuit against the bank, and over time we were able to get the bank to rescind the foreclosure sale, modify their loan at the same rate that it would have been modified back had they done it correctly a couple years prior. And it was a really satisfying day when and I went with the couple, and they were able to move back into the house. But that's an extreme example of a case where the foreclosure had already occurred, an eviction had already occurred, and the couple had already vacated their home. And they had raised a family there. They would tell me how they would drive by looking at their house. So that was a satisfying outcome for a foreclosure case.
Yeah. Could we just review again the kind of cases so the viewers have in their head, like what kind of cases, if something came up for someone, what they could go to legal services and get help with?
Sure. Again,
it sounds like housing is a big one.
Well, I'm a housing attorney, so that's been a bit of the focus. But it's really basic needs. And so housing is definitely a big area.
Is divorce, or is it just domestic abuse with divorce?
It is family law, but with assisting victims of domestic violence.
Okay.
So in our office, we would not, and you asked this question earlier, we would not assist someone who was going through a divorce and had, say, a child custody issue where there was no
abuse.
There was no abuse. So we only handle cases where there's abuse. But again, if you're somebody who lives in public or subsidized housing, or even if it's private housing, and you're being evicted, certainly you should call our office. There's a few.
So it could be private housing, but they're a HUD tenant?
Sure. Oh, sure. There are different kind of subsidies involved. Some public housing is owned and operated by the local housing authority, like here in Medfield Housing Authority. Mm-hmm. So they have a development where I think they have 60 public housing units. So those people may be aware of. There are other subsidized developments where there are site-based subsidies in those programs, but they're not owned and operated by a local housing authority. They're a private development. So certainly those clients, but even private tenants, we have a few special programs at the office. One is a eviction defense clinic that we offer every week. In that program, we travel to the different courts in our service area, and we collect the new eviction cases, and this is a public record, so we get the name and address of anyone being evicted, and we invite them to come to our office to help them fill out the forms they need to fill out to defend themselves, raise any defenses or reasons why they shouldn't be evicted, or claims that they may have against a landlord. So we help them with those forms, and we explain the process, because the process can be a little complicated. So that's open to anybody regardless of income. And so we do that every morning, every Monday morning from 10 to 12 a.m. So if you're somebody who received eviction papers, you don't have to call us ahead of time. You can walk in and attend that clinic.
And do you help them with the answer of complaint, or with interrogatories, or things like that?
All of that.
Okay.
So typically a court action is started with a complaint, and then the court expects you to file an answer to that, a response to that complaint. So we help them with that written response. And again, that answer contains their story, or their reasons why they don't
affirmative defense
affirmative defenses. Yeah. And so we help them with all that, and we also help them understanding what to expect when they go to court and the timeline involved. Eviction cases are a little unique in that they happen much quicker than a typical case. If you filed a case, for example, let's say you hired someone to paint your house, and they did not do a professional job, and you wanted to sue them to get your money back, that case could take a couple years in court. Eviction cases happen within several weeks. They're very
timelined, aren't they?
Yeah, very quick.
Another one you mentioned was debt collection. I think that would be an interesting one for the viewers too. Can you give an example of where you might get involved with that?
Yeah. Again, I wish we had more resources where we could do more consumer-related work, because that's certainly, when we do surveys and ask what the needs are, that's certainly ranks pretty high. Unfortunately, there's not grant dollars to help us do that, but it's something that we always have our mind on that, and trying to figure out how could we get some resources to do more of that. But that said, we do help people with bankruptcy, and there are different kinds of bankruptcies, but the one bankruptcy people are most familiar with are personal, or a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is like a straight liquidation, where people essentially get a financial fresh start when they're insolvent, they can't make their monthly payments on their debts. And so how we do that in two ways. One is through our elder program. If someone presents with debt problems, we might help them through our office file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. But we also have another program in our office, a special program called the Private Bar Involvement Program. And this is where private attorneys sign up at our office, and they volunteer and give free legal services to clients in simple bankruptcies, in simple divorces, uncontested, we call those uncontested cases, or no asset bankruptcy cases, where someone has a lot of debt but not a lot of assets. And simple wills. And so last year, I want to say, through the Private Bar Involvement Program, we provided, or through our office, over $500,000 in free legal work, and helped hundreds of people through that program. So that's a nice way that we connect with the private bar, and also for private attorneys who want to donate some time to help low-income clients, and the kinds of cases that we don't generally do.
I know for myself, I go to Dedham District Court a couple of times a year through the Norfolk Bar, and we give free legal help. Yes, exactly. That's another great program. Similar, that's like an attorney for the night or attorney for the day kind of program. Yeah, I go for the night, and then I help as many people as I can during that time period. Yeah, so that's good.
The other thing, sometimes people present with a payment order, so they might be involved in a collection case, so they might have overextended themselves on a credit card, for example, and the creditor then will bring a collection action, and as part of that, a judge may enter a repayment order. And typically, if a client is not represented, they may agree to
something that they can't afford.
Something they can't afford, or worse yet, they might agree to a payment order when, by law, they're not required to enter into one.
I've sat in one of those sessions, and sometimes you feel like people don't even know what hit them because they try to get so many done at one time, in a short period of time.
So we help vacate those types of orders where the law exempts certain types of income, like, for example, supplemental security income, which is a disability income through the Social Security Administration, or unemployment income, or transitional income, the kinds of stuff where the law has said this income is protected from creditors, and so where a court or a creditor should not have asked for a payment order. Typically, if you have those kinds of sources of income, a creditor will withdraw that request for a payment order, or postpone that case for several months, or maybe dismiss the case altogether. So those are the kinds of consumer stuff that we deal with.
Now, do you have any tips that maybe you could give our viewers, some tips with regards to that?
Sure. I think over the time that I've been at Legal Services, one of the things that I often wish is that a client would have called us sooner. I gave that example of the case where the foreclosure and the eviction. Can you imagine if that client had contacted me prior to the foreclosure sale? They ended up, that case took a while to resolve, because anytime you have a lawsuit, that case happened to be in federal court, the cases grind a little slower in those kinds of cases. But had they reached out to our office sooner, we would have been able to assist them with more options. And I think that's the biggest tip I could give is, if you have a legal matter where the consequences are serious, and all the stuff we talked about are very serious, someone's housing, someone's family, schooling, economic benefits, those are all things that change people's lives. If you have a serious legal matter, civil matter, certainly call our office and try to get help sooner than later, because typically the sooner you get to an attorney, the more options you have.
Absolutely.
And also, I know some folks sometimes they think, oh, I can do this myself. I will tell you over the years, I think this is a good example of why it's important to have an attorney in these kinds of cases. There was a study done, housing related, with the Mass Law Reform Institute, and what they did is they went back over a period of time and they looked at all the cases, the eviction cases. And again, what the judge in those cases decide who gets possession or who gets to stay in the house or the apartment. And what they found that in 97% of the cases where the tenant was not represented by an attorney, they lost possession. To me, that's a very telling statistic, because certainly my experience is you can flip those numbers in the opposite way with the clients that I've represented in housing matters. So what that tells me, it's important to have a lawyer when you go to court, and not think that you can do it on your own. Lawyers tend to, they're able to, well, first they understand the law and the procedures better, but they also look at a case without emotion. So they're able to really give good advice on objective advice, what should happen. So I think that would be my biggest tip. I don't know how much time we have.
I think we have a little bit of time.
Just in terms of housing, I often when folks call our office and when they receive the initial notices regarding an eviction or a foreclosure, sometimes they think they have to leave. They don't understand that. No, you don't have to leave simply because you received a letter from your landlord saying that it was the landlord's intent to terminate your tenancy. Doesn't mean you have to leave on that termination date. Or if you get a letter from a bank saying that your house is, I give you a specific foreclosure sale date. Those things are as horrible as they are to get. They don't mean that you have to leave your house. The only person that can force you to leave your house in an eviction case is a judge. So they
and
have
then the constable.
Well, and if it goes that far, so there has to be some judicial process in an eviction action. So I always like people to understand that, and sometimes we get a situation where they get a notice and they think, oh, I have to leave, and then they do that. Couple other tips I think I would. We talked about this on the debt collection. I know, for most people, not being able to pay their monthly obligations upsets them. Most people want to pay their debts, and when they can't do that, they feel bad. And on the other side of that is there's aggressive collection activities.
I was going to ask you about the harassment sometimes that goes with that aggressive collection.
Yeah, you could have a collection call where they might suggest that if you don't pay this, you might go to jail, that kind of thing. You do not go to jail for a debt. It is true, though, that if you're summoned into court, that if you don't appear, it may be that they might do a capias, which is like a civil arrest warrant, may issue, not because you didn't pay the debt, but because you didn't show up to court at the time. So you don't go to jail for not paying your debts. The other thing, the other tip I might suggest, especially in this day where it seems like there's a lot of scams going on, that if you don't know who you're talking to, if you didn't make the call,
good point.
Don't give out any information over the telephone. I
had recently an elderly client who gave out information to an IRS agent.
Yeah. And
it was terrible because he gave a social security number,
right,
and it wasn't an IRS agent. So that's a very good point to make.
They're very these scam artists are very tricky in how they present, and they scare people into thinking. So when in doubt, especially if you didn't initiate the call, when in doubt, say, oh, just submit that to me in writing, make that request to me in writing. And feel safe in doing that. You're not going to get in any trouble doing that, ever. I think another tip that I was kind of thinking about is certainly the getting your affairs in order with a power of attorney or healthcare proxy or will, not just for folks who are older, but for everybody. Sometimes you have things happen in life unexpectedly, and it's important to have that kind of paperwork in order. And again, our office, for elders, we do healthcare proxies. We do
advanced directives.
Yeah, power of attorneys as well. And so those things we do for that. But even if we also do a private bar involvement program. So even if we're not an elder and it's not something we would do otherwise, we can try to help you with a private bar involvement program.
Well, I really appreciate you coming today because I think you gave our viewers a lot of information, and those tips were great tips. So I really appreciate you coming today. And as always, I want to tell my viewers to stay tuned because it's Simply Legal.
preceding was a production of Medfield TV, Community Shows.